Something took me from my home and killed me every day for over 3 years. I'm writing this because all of the shrinks I visited think I'm delusional. They believe something happened to me, but I disassociated the entire event and instead imagined this place. I didn't. Nothing I felt or experienced was imaginary. I don't know how I caught its eye, or if it will come back for me, and I live in fear of that simple thought every day. So, here I am, writing this down to warn others, to tell them of the nightmare I experienced. Though, honestly I don't think this is really a warning so much as it is a victim statement. On my 21st birthday, I disappeared for 3.5 years. I only know this because I've been told nearly 1,000 times. I've been poked and prodded with so many needles that I've made voodoo dolls jealous. No one understood what happened to me. Hell, I don't understand what happened, but I know it was real. It was around 3 in the afternoon. I was excited to finally be able to drink at the bar with my friends. They had always teased me because I was the youngest, and the de facto designated driver because of it, but tonight it was my turn to get so drunk I wouldn't remember where I put my feet. It never came. I was going to stop by my best friend's place before we headed out. He lived just a few blocks away, so I figured I'd walk over, and when the time came, he'd be the designated driver for the evening. As I rounded the corner to his street, things changed. The world around me seemed like it was made of liquid, the air felt oppressively thick, and I had trouble finding my breath. I choked and gasped, clawing for air as everything around me seemed to shimmer and undulate. It was suddenly like I was swimming. Air seemed to vacate the space I was in quickly, and I felt the world darkening around me. Nausea gripped my gut to the point that I had fallen to my knees, gripping my stomach as the world spun. Then, everything blacked out. When I came to, I was somewhere else. It was a room. Everything looked like it was made from polished steel. There was no door, no windows, and nothing to indicate what time it was. There was just a single metal bench on the far end of the room, long enough to fit 3 people. As I explored and tried to get a sense of my surroundings, another overwhelming wave of nausea gripped me. The world spun as I clung desperately to consciousness, only to see one of the walls open and a pair of human-looking figures step into the room. I didn't see them fully, though. The world faded with my consciousness. The next time I woke, I was in a lying position, my head was throbbing, and there was some intense light burning into my eyes. I couldn't reach for my forehead, though, my hands had been secured to whatever I was on. I panicked. Desperately, began to thrash and pull at my restraints, but I couldn't move. I wanted to cry out, but something was covering my mouth. "Relax," a voice said from somewhere I couldn't see. "We understand there may be some confusion, but that is part of the experiment." I struggled against the bonds, cries for help muffled by whatever was over my face. "This will go far more smoothly if you relax." The voice spoke again. "We cannot accurately determine the level of stress you are under if you are already under so much of it." It was cold, clinical. Finally, something entered my vision. I wanted to scream when I saw it, wanted to deny it was real, but I couldn't. It had no face to speak of, just a mass of flesh with what looked like a long, thin line traveling from top to bottom. The top of its head was crowned with strange, fleshy tendrils that opened to small holes at the end of each. I counted 5 on the thing's head as it seemed to regard. This will, unfortunately, be quite painful. However, it is of utmost importance to us that in the end you answer honestly. Hampering our experiments will only lengthen the process. For this reason, we recommend you comply. There was a click, and whatever covered my mouth was removed. "What are you? What the fuck is this place? I didn't sign up for whatever your experiments are." Most test subjects don't volunteer to be tested upon. The thing spoke, but it had no face. There were no moving lips. I think it was at this point that I realized it wasn't talking to me. It was thinking at me. "Let me go. Just, let me go, and we can forget this happened," I begged. "That would yield unsatisfactory results," it replied. "Now, I would recommend preparing yourself, but we are unsure how prepared you will be able to make yourself." The soft electrical hum of machinery filled my ears as I felt my arm beginning to move on its own. The machine extended it outward at first, so that it was parallel with my shoulder. It conducted a few more movements, testing the range of motion in my arm. Then, the machine started to bend downward. Before I could call out, before I could tell this thing to stop, my arm snapped. Broken in two like a branch, the bone spiking from my flesh. I screamed, agony flooded my system, adrenaline flooded my veins. My breath was suddenly ragged in my chest as I fought back tears, groaning in absolute anguish. "Please, explain what you were experiencing," the entity demanded. I could only scream. Pain flooded my system and all I could think about was how much it hurt. On a scale of 1 to 10. "Please, rate your pain." It kept going, completely ignoring my screams. Eventually shock started to settle in, the pain was still there, but I could think. "It's an 11. Is that what you wanted me to say? Will you let me go now? You broke my arm. Why you have your data?" The creature tilted its head as it looked at me. "We have only just begun our experimentation. You are already unable to continue?" Yes, for the love of God, I cannot keep going," I begged. Please. Just let me go." There was another click, and soon my other arm snapped, sending agonizing jolts of electric pain through my body again. Again I screamed, again I was racked with agony. Please for the love of God, let me go." The entity regarded me the same way. Cold, methodical. Like a scientist taking notes on a lab rat. Because that's all I was. I was a lab rat. A toy, and this thing was gauging what it felt like when it broke me. My leg was next, and again the pain was excruciating. I passed out at this point. The world went white around me as my body tried to cope with the sheer amount of trauma it was being put through. Evidently, though, these things had something for that, too. I snapped back awake as it broke my other leg, the creature watching with some sort of bizarre fascination. At least, I think it was. There was no real way for it to determine what this thing was doing. At this point your body has suffered severe trauma. The levels of pain you are experiencing will have flooded your body with extreme levels of adrenaline. If it weren't for the fact that this thing was talking in my head, I wouldn't have heard it through the haze of suffering it cast over my thoughts. Another click. Another whir. I felt my head being pulled upward. The pain in my neck was growing more intense as the machine continued to pull. Then, suddenly, there was nothing. No pain, no voices, no anything. The world around me faded, and there was black. That was the first time I died. I woke on the ground an indeterminate amount of time later. No broken bones, no bruises, no cuts, nothing. It was as if the brutal agony I had just gone through never existed. The problem with that mindset, with those thoughts, was that it did happen. I remembered every second of it, vividly. Getting over the shock of things, I decided to get my bearings. I was in another room, from what I could tell. There was a bench, much like the one I had seen when I first arrived in this place, and everything was that same polished metal. There were no signs of anything else. Just the bench, what looked like a sink, and that was essentially it. So, I moved to the bench, sat down, and waited. All I had were my thoughts, and those weren't doing me much good at the moment. Outwardly I seemed calm enough, but inside I was panicking. None of this made any sense. Where was? How did I get here? Didn't I just literally have my head ripped off of my shoulders? I didn't have much time to think. I was hit by another wave of that crippling nausea. I tried to fight it, to maintain my consciousness, but eventually I was still overtaken. When I woke I was on some sort of fleshy mass, and as my vision focused, my stomach rolled. The entire room looked like it was made of living flesh. The walls undulated and pulsed with an unseen energy. The ground was soft and a little difficult to move across. There was a smell in the air, clean and chemical, but underneath it there was another odor, one I couldn't quite place. I wasn't restrained this time, but I almost wish I was. The place I was in was unlike anything I had ever seen before, and that only made me want to run. Do not be so frightened. I heard a clinical voice call out. Your last test went smoothly enough, so we are going to continue experimentation. Please, be prepared to give us a thorough explanation of what you are feeling. I'm feeling fucking terrified is what I'm feeling. You guys killed me. You ripped my head off. You broke my arms and legs. Now you've got me here. Let me go. When the experiments are finished, you will be free to leave. The voice patiently responded. Remember, compliance drives progress. The more information you give us, the less you will have to endure. They killed me again that night. I was mauled by some sort of ravenous dog-like creature. All the while they continued to ask me to rate my pain, to explain exactly what I was feeling. All in all, they killed me 1,278 times. Every morning I'd wake up alive, no damage, but the scars on my mind remained. I was shot, stabbed, poisoned, starved, infected, drowned, burned, and brutalized. Each time it only took a day for me to die. Anything that slowly killed me would be accelerated as they tried to gather more data. Sometimes my death was quick, and those were the ones I learned to appreciate. Other times, though, it dragged on for what felt like an eternity of pure and utter pain. I learned a lot about life, religion, the soul, all of that superstitious bullshit. You want to know what happens when you die? Where you go? The answer is terrible. It's not just a ceasing of existence like the atheists believe, but there's also no paradise or pit. It's nothing. I don't mean that in a nihilistic sense, I mean it literally. It's blackness. There's no smells, no sound, nothing to feel or taste, it's just a vast emptiness. The horrifying part, though? You're aware. You're present. Just a consciousness in utter nothingness, floating through the void. The worst death? The worst thing I ever experienced in my time being killed daily? Drowning. The whole time your body is screaming at you, telling you you're dying. Begging you to find air so it can reset itself and keep you moving, but it can't. So you start to get this, pins and needles feeling all over your body. Your ears start to ring and then everything starts to go dark. Then, you're in the void. Dead. Sometimes it felt like they let me stay dead for longer, but in the end I'd always wake up in the same place. Cool, metal room with nothing but a bench and a sink in it. Nothing changed about their demeanor. They simply continued to ask questions, and if my death was quick they'd inquire about what I felt when they brought me back. Ask me questions about my mindset, to rate my pain, the same things over and over. I eventually became numb to dying. I'd wake up, knowing that the day held another way for me to be annihilated. The creatures would gas me, take me into one of their experimentation rooms, and kill me. For 3.5 years they killed me. Then, one day, I was brought into one of the test chambers. The entity was already in there. I wasn't restrained, or gassed, just brought before it. I wanted to lunge at it, to make it experience a modicum of the death I had tasted at its hands, but something was preventing it. Like my mind wasn't going to let me move against it. After this, testing will have concluded. We've gathered all of the information we need from you. It thought at me. My heart skipped a beat, and for the first time since my arrival I felt the bitter taste of hope in my mouth again. You mean, you're going to let me go? You will be released when testing is concluded. We had promised this when testing began. I couldn't believe it. All right then, let's get this over with. The entity said nothing else. It turned to me. It wore no clothes. Its body was this mixed hue of light purples and pinks, almost like bruised flesh. Its skin wrinkled in strange places and its arms were too long, they nearly touched the ground. Its knees bent in the opposite direction, but that didn't seem to slow it as it bent and moved forward at an alarming speed. I felt it place a hand on my shoulder, felt the familiar agony of a vice-like grip lifting me into the air to meet its face. I had seen what was hidden beyond that slit in the head once, I never wanted to again. One of the tendrils on its head moved into my view and I watched as a long, bone-colored needle slid from the hole in it. It slit my throat with that needle and I bled out on the ground in front of it. My last thought hearing, "Thank you for your cooperation." I woke on the ground the same place I had disappeared. The corner of the street near my buddy's house. I didn't know how long I'd been gone at this point, or how many times I had died, only that it was over. The relief I felt was overwhelming. I couldn't believe I was free. I laid there, in the road, staring at the sky and not a chrome ceiling. For the first time since I had been taken, I began to weep. I was so overwhelmed with everything that had happened that I just broke down and sobbed in the middle of the road. I don't know how long I cried for, but God, it was cathartic. I did eventually head over to my friend's house, and I scared the shit out of him. That was when I had found out I was gone for 3 years, that no one knew what happened to me. I tried to explain what had happened, but as I did I realized how crazy it sounded. "Yeah man, I was coming to your place so we could go get smashed and I was abducted by some alien thing that killed me every day for the 3.5 years I was gone." Doesn't exactly come up as something a sane person would tell anyone. The police were contacted, my parents were contacted, the news showed up, I was a local celebrity for a while. No one believed me about the alien, though. If that's even what it was. Maybe it was a demon? Maybe it was something else entirely. All I know is that it was able to kill me and bring me back completely unharmed. Eventually it was suggested I talk to a psychiatrist. Everyone believes something happened to me. That I was kidnapped and taken somewhere, maybe feed copious amounts of psychoactive drugs so that I'd think it was all aliens and dying. But when I explained what happened to the shrink, when I went into graphic detail about dying in so many different ways, I could see the concern on the doc's face. They tried all sorts of therapies, tried to get me to open up about what happened, but every time the story was the same. I was abducted, and some weird alien things killed me. Over and over again. They couldn't get the breakthrough they were hoping for. So I was tested. Medically. Doctors wanted to know if I had been dosed with psychotropic medicines or some such bullshit. No one could accept my story. I still don't think any believes me, and I don't blame them. I mean, if I had been told by someone they had been killed over 1,000 times in over 1,000 different ways, I don't think I believe them either. I don't know what it was they were trying to determine, or why it all involved killing one person, but I know that it was a nightmare. I'm terrified of heat mirages at this point. I don't know if these things are done with me, or if they're just luring me into a false sense of security. It doesn't matter, though. If they came again I couldn't stop them, and if they come for you, you won't be able to stop them either.